Welcome back from the break. Now, the Ghana Black Stars, or Ghana as a country, has failed to qualify for the 2024 African Cup of Nations, AFCON, due to take place in Morocco next year. It marks the first time in 2 decades that the Black Stars will miss the tournament. The significant setback raises concerns about the state of Ghana's football and the steps needed to reverse the national team's declining fortunes. What do we need to do? A lot of people have started talking about this. I mean, you on the street and in your offices, your homes, wherever, have been talking about how to revive the declining, Black Stars, our beloved team, that the only thing that is able to unite the country, irrespective of any political party one belongs to, is football. Now, former football administrator Herbert Mensah offers insight into the challenges facing the team, including issues of management, player development, and strategy. He emphasizes the importance of structural reforms to rebuild Ghana's footballing legacy. Herbert Mensah, who is the president of Africa Rugby and recently elected to the powerful executive board of the World Rugby, offers some solutions in his interview with my colleague Elton Brobe. And you know what Herbert Mensah did with Asante Kotoko in those days when there was a fierce battle between Herbert Mensah and Harry Zakor of Hearts of Oak. It was an interesting period he had to be in to be a football lover. But this interview will wrap up the bulletin for us today. There's more of the news on myjoyonline.com. When you go there, you can get all the news that you want, be it entertainment, politics, what have you. Just go on to myjoyonline.com and you have it all there. So thank you for being a part of the show today. On behalf of the cameramen, the sound directors, and the producers, I say thanks for joining us. But like I said, we'll leave you with this wonderful interaction between my colleague Elton Brobe and Herbert Mensah, where Herbert Mensah offers credible insight into how to revive the declining fortunes of the Black Stars. Enjoy the rest of the show and have a good evening.
So this is the special sports edition of the Pulse here on Joy News. And this afternoon we are privileged, indeed honored, to have on the program the president of Rugby Africa, Mr. Herbert Mensah, who now sits on the executive board of World Rugby, a very prestigious position that he finds himself. But it was not without hard work. Obviously, his hard work, dedication to work, and of course his plan won him a seat on that prestigious board. And this afternoon, we want to understand what it means to be on the executive board of World Rugby and to what extent will his presence on the world affairs impacts on the sporting activity here in Ghana, indeed Africa as a whole. Mr. Mensah, you're welcome.
Thank you.
And first, congratulations on your new role as member of the executive board of World Rugby.
Thank you.
As I understand it, this was an elective position.
Yes.
So what worked the magic for you?
Oh, I don't know. I think every election has its challenges. And this one in particular was very difficult because I initially was not going to even contest. I've only been on World Rugby Council for 18 months. You are dealing with 52 votes from many different countries. The structure of voting in World Rugby is different from that in football. Football is one country, one vote. In World Rugby, the big nations have 3 votes. The whole of Africa has 2, for example. Okay. So the pathway was very difficult. There were 3 people vying for the chairmanship to have a new chairman of World Rugby. What we tried to do was to implore the voting, the rest of the people carrying votes, to look at what a balanced board would bring. So therefore, we're saying, listen to individuals, see what it is that they bring to the game, and then from that position, choose, as opposed to simply choosing because somebody is somebody's person.
Right.
And I therefore, in a short space of time, had to lay out how I thought I could work as a team member, how I could contribute maybe something different, and yet it is appeal to those in the tier 1 nations as well as those across the board. A very delicate balance.
So, I mean, first it was Africa, the election to the Africa presidency and now the world. So, in terms of what you've done in the African terrain, will you say that within the period that you've served as president of the African Rugby, what has been the story? Is it one that can talk of improvement in terms of the appeal to the game, revenue-wise, participation and patronage? What has been the story so far?
If it's Africa, I think it's a work in progress. We have come in understanding that we are limited in terms of resources, but we are trying to change the structure upon which we operate. My mantra has always been that sport is big business, which is what I've taken to World Rugby, and that we need a mindset change, a change in mindset, which is the more difficult of the two to try and get across. And we've tried to put that across in the African sphere. Although we cannot take credit, we proudly raise our hands and say, South Africa is the world champions, they're part of Africa, so we have a double world champion here on the continent of Africa. We believe that we have the talent in Africa, that there's more exclusive athletic talent that we see across the board, whether it is in football or boxing or every sport has Africa is uniquely placed in many ways. And over the last year, we've tried to change the way in which we approach the sport and how it's looked at. That if you have a certain amount in terms of budget, how can you raise money in different ways to put together bigger and better competitions? And we just had one here in Accra, Ghana, which was extraordinary.
Right.
And then we've had some in Kampala and in Mauritius around, which have all been of a very, very high level. Off the back of that, you've seen countries like Kenya now back at the top of the game. They're in the HSBC World 7 Series. We've got Uganda and Madagascar as part of the Challenger Series and the BXV Series. So more African countries this year have got onto the global stage in terms of competing.
But before that, when it came to rugby, mention could only be made of South Africa, maybe Uganda, and now Ghana is emerging as one of the places to pay attention to in terms of rugby. Is it your expectation that, just like it is with football, the attention and the acceptance will be spread across the continent in the years to come?
Well, I think we're the pioneers. Football has become a political tool for many countries. Governments look at football to make the citizenry happy. The citizenry follow football as the main sport. Our contention is that rugby brings something different and dynamic, and that everybody's different. Not everybody can be a great footballer.
Right.
Rugby allows somebody who is 6'5" and 160 kilos to play against somebody who's 70 kilos and a different size and proportion. The value system as well in rugby, I think, has more to offer young people in terms of moving forward. And Africa has so much opportunity. We don't need to see the Africans going abroad to do well in basketball, NBA, UFC, Usman, Ngannou, and so forth. They're from Africa. Half of the French rugby team are of African heritage. A large portion of the English rugby team are of African heritage. So we need to create the enabling environments here that is talent. The business is a $7 billion a year business plus. So why don't we invest more in alternative sports like rugby? How can we get governments involved more in terms of changing the curricula in schools, in terms of staging, as we've been very lucky here in Ghana, even though we're not a rugby playing nation, that His Excellency the President built a fit-for-purpose rugby park, which was extraordinary, and then helped support the recent gender sevens ladies 12-nation tournament. If we get more countries emulating what we've done in Ghana, then really there's a chance for the sport.
But in terms of Ghana, what can we do to build on what has been done so far?
Well, it's going to need investment. I think the question of Ghana is a mirror of what is happening in sports in general in Ghana. Sports is big business, and you have a lot of people who perhaps don't understand that or are not the right people to be at the helm of that. And that happens from the sporting level itself, all the way up to the people who are the custodians at administrative level, at the most senior level, that you have to really sit down and say, do we have the right people in terms of the civil servants and the ministries in place to bring about what is required for sports? And I think that as we move forward, we really have to start looking and saying that when we appoint a minister and his deputies, when we appoint people within the ministry, that they are people who can really help transform the game. It's not a desk job just to take that is another job. There's something dynamic about sports. And I think that if we get the right people in place, then you start to understand that how you can build a pyramid scheme from schooling system to regional levels and looking at centers of excellence of which you can then pick young sportsmen to be rugby players or handball players or volleyball players. It needs a dynamic shift because on the one side, if it is Ghana, you have a presidency who has built so many AstroTurf pitches, so much infrastructure. We saw it from the AU Games. So that is being provided at that level. So what's going wrong underneath that for the disciplines themselves to be doing so badly across the continent, across the world?
We'll come to talk about other disciplines, but because we brought in the element of the sports ministry, for example, and whoever is in that office then, sometimes assume that he or she is responsible for only football. I mean, they misconstrue the meaning of sports to mean Ministry of Football and other related activities. So the attention really is always geared towards football, and even that is always the Black Stars. Will you say that perhaps we've had wrong people pursuing or pushing the sporting agenda in this country, such that their mindset is always geared towards one particular discipline, football, and even that restricted to the national team?
I think you definitely have to query the caliber of people who have been in seats over the last 15, 20 years. You have to. I mean, people don't want to call out a spade, but surely if the caliber of those involved better understood what was required, we wouldn't be where we are. Because I started off saying that the quality of the Ghanaian, of the West African, is key. I go all around and you say, if you're looking at the quality footballers, they don't have to be tall or any particular distance. They have a balance, they have a fluidity, they have something that is not only Ghanaian, Ivorian, Malian, Guinean, Cameroonian, Senegalese. We are in the part of the world where we have an extraordinary athlete. And it's really, how do we develop it? Because I've spent part of last year up in Morocco, which I'm going to soon, and listening to the minister there speak about how it is that grassroots sports and the sports development backed up with infrastructure has seen them reaching the semi-final of the World Cup and consistently performing well, not only at football, but in a range of other sports as well, which are supported along the same way. I've been in Uganda and I've seen the minister there, the investments they've made in rugby and they've made in other sports at the same time. So if that is then mirrored across, where you look at Kenya, Uganda, Morocco, you look at Algeria, Egypt, you come to other sports and then go to the Olympics, the Commonwealth Games, you better understand that there's a structure in place that will deliver excellence within the limited budget that they may have.
Are we being left behind, Ghana, for example?
Yes. Simple. I mean, yes, we are. We've all grown up understanding that we could walk with our chests out. People were petrified of the Black Stars. Petrified. And I even saw when I was running Kotoko and trying to rebuild the club, sitting in Casablanca with the presidents of ASEC Mimosa, Raja Casablanca, and Widad. And all four of us, leaders of our clubs, there was equitable respect. You could feel it. Here's the first time that Widad and Casablanca were in the same room like that. And ASEC Mimosa and ourselves, Kumasi Asante Kotoko. And you're there on merit that you call the name Kotoko. It meant something. You call the name Raja Casablanca or any of the others, ASEC Mimosa, Widad. It was something that you knew that you can't play at this level. So to go from that point to the point that we are really just also runs. We cannot even qualify for Africa Cup of Nations. And we are happy as the bar drops, not to the floor, below the floor. Below the floor. And if you're a supporter, you are there looking at your coach. But you know my philosophy in sports. You need to win off the field in order to win on the field.
Right.
You need to take a sense of responsibility for who you are and not think that you're the best. I'm not the best. Nobody is. Have you thought through that strategic plan, that business plan that puts you in office, that you make the decisions? Either you are saying that the Ghanaian athlete is not good enough, or else you've made wrong decisions. And that's the reason that you finish bottom of a mediocre group in terms of qualifying for the Nations Cup.
It is sad. I mean, I was going to come back to the Black Stars issue much later on, but since you brought it up, I mean, what happened to the Ghana Black Stars this week clearly is a result of bad planning years back. It just didn't happen today.
That's very true.
And possibly maybe because we've had wrong people in the right places directing affairs with the Black Stars. Are we ever going to get out of it? We have the World Cup that people say that at all costs we should qualify. We may have players playing in some of the top leagues. Kudus, for example, plays for West Ham, Semedo with Bournemouth, and most of our players in the other leagues in Europe. Yes, when we assemble them, it's difficult for them to even beat a team like Niger and even Sudan. What really is wrong with the organization of our game?
When people go to the stadium, 40, 60, 70,000 people, they're expecting a finished product. They're expecting that you're wearing the jersey, that you are so well prepared. The systems work. You will see that when small teams are playing, and you see when Gambia is playing and other teams, there's no big star.
No.
And you will have noticed it even with Niger and Sudan and the rest. You're not seeing stars in the top Bundesliga clubs or Premier League or La Liga. But what you have are people playing with a system that makes sense. And they're playing in a coordinated fashion that makes sense. That's why the Cape Verde Islands and Comoros and the rest, there are no weak teams anymore who are playing. So what is it about our administrators that put a system together, which when they fail, they still have the guts to come and make excuses that nobody in their right mind would accept? We have to look inwardly at ourselves. A great sporting nation like Ghana is no longer a great sporting nation.
At all.
Not at any level. You go to the Olympics, we've wasted taxpayers' money. You go to Commonwealth Games, you've wasted taxpayers' money. You go to Nations Cup, and the amount of money that is spent singularly on football, the political sport, if I can put it like that, is not acceptable. And there needs to be hard truths. There's something about we Ghanaians. You know, I took over Kotoko, and people don't realize that 2 years before that, I was approached by some people to do the same. It's as though you have to reach the point where the club or the nation or the sport is down. So in my case, Kotoko could not field 11 players for a league match.
This was 1999.
Could not field 11 players for a league match. So it's at that point that you have points deducted. You do not have a squad. People are bringing people from the village to say, can you play? That a light bulb goes on and says, we better fix this now. So what is it now? I've seen this rot in the Black Stars long before, even before the current management of the GFA. There's a certain direction in which we started going. Once you separate where you go in terms of the development of the domestic league and what happens in your school system and the pyramid scheme for excellence, once you separate that and you just simply think you can cut and paste, you end up where you are. And the problem is when you win. Because when you win, you think the problems have gone away.
They celebrate the win and forget about the challenges.
Absolutely, without understanding that the underlying issues are simply not good enough.
The GFA, they've taken some measures. First amongst them, they've dissolved the management team of the Black Stars. That, for now, is what they've done. What we've picked is that they'll be meeting the coach, for the coach to justify why he should be allowed to continue to serve as manager of the Black Stars team. So these two measures that they've taken so far, first, the dissolution of the management team, is it enough? Some have suggested that perhaps the GFA itself must go.
Well, it's inevitable. What do you expect them to do? That is what they would have to do. And then Of course, if there's a blame game, you blame the coach, not the person who appointed the coach, not the person who decided the coach was the right person in the first place. At what point do you decide the coach is not the first place, not the right person? Is it when you draw at home, when you lose to Angola? Is it when you have a chaotic World Cup exit? At what point? Is it when you eventually lose at home? At what
to even attract the attention of policymakers? But for the Black Stars, it's like you only need to ask, and then it comes. So people then begin to question the commitment of the people who are running our football.
I remember after Kwesi left the scenes and they were entering into an election, I made a statement then. It's the same statement I made when I took over Kotoko that was so controversial that I believed that in the case of Kotoko that the board members, Otumfo Pokuwari had dissolved the board, but I was suggesting that there was a need for some board direction, but every board member should contribute a certain amount to be on the board. It's a privilege to serve on the board, so contribute to be. And I'm not saying that is the case of the GFA, but I think it would be great if it is. That certainly in a couple of elections back, I stated that whoever should be running the GFA, the easiest thing to raise money for this side of a beauty pageant is football.
Right.
So therefore, you shouldn't go to the government and be really requiring the government.
They should be able to work and raise their own money to run
if I was
the
running
national teams.
If I was running the national teams, I'd be doing that. Because you are the chief. Even in rugby, at my recent AGM, when somebody got up and he says, I'm President Mensah, and I said, no, don't call me the president. I don't encourage it. I'm the chief marketing officer for Rugby Africa. We've got to look at our finances. We've got to look at our structure. You've got to look at your governance. You've got to really look and say where at the end of the day, because for the entire continent of Africa, I receive a budget of $2.2 odd million.
For the entire continent?
The entire continent.
$2 million?
Just over.
That isn't much.
I know, and that's to run about 8 competitions, airline tickets, everything else that is totally included in that package. Staff, administrative costs, all within that budget. So you start thinking, there is no fat, there is no big man activity, there is no whatever. I should have been on a plane this morning at 4 a.m. for Morocco. I had a choice, either the World Rugby Awards on Sunday in Monte Carlo or going to Casablanca. I've chosen to go to Casablanca.
Okay.
My ticket is an economy ticket. I'm paying from my pocket to upgrade the ticket. The way in which it is that we run our affairs, understanding the position of the stakeholders, understanding what it is we're trying to do. So we try now, in my tenure, to see how we can have this marriage with more governments, as we've had with His Excellency, our President. And Uganda as well, they came to the table. The minister in Morocco has come to the table, where I'm trying to say, pick up hosting costs for us. Pick up these costs, pick up that cost. Because the significance for your country, by us staging events there of this level, if we can bring the top teams in for the competitions, is a big deal. The way we look at money and business, therefore, is completely different.
And then touching on that, I mean, now it's no longer an Africa affair, it's a global affair. And just going through the responsibilities of the World Rugby Executive Board, I mean, you are responsible for framing and overseeing implementation of World Rugby's strategic plan and application of policy decisions, meaning you are at the forefront of what is to be done going forward. This is a huge responsibility. How are you and the other members going about this?
It's massive. This morning, for example, we have our first EXCO board meeting on Tuesday at 9 p.m. because the new chairman is from Australia. And the members are from New Zealand, from South Africa, from Ghana, from London, from Dublin, from Canada. So 9 p.m. is the time that we've been given. So this morning I spent time with a very powerful member of World Rugby, not a board member, to ask him for advice. I just said, look, I know the basis upon which those who voted for me voted me in. And I need to understand what exactly, not only is the process at this level about, and what exactly is expected. And the critical thing, after a lot of things which I won't reveal in public, but one of the things that the gentleman said is, you should understand that you no longer represent Africa. You represent the world.
Right.
You see, the depth of that statement is massive. So there are 6 of us elected by our colleagues from council to sit on the executive board. The responsibility, therefore, of framing and being part of a discussion process to frame a strategic plan or reframe it, reset it, take it back to the members for approval is massive. And for me, it's about bringing in a different skill set and mindset to the table, but understanding that there's a global position in terms of where you are going, and you're not being paid. So there may be stipends at that level, I don't know. But certainly you don't have a 6 or 7 figure salary. Considering how many billions we got from the World Cup, I'm not sure how many we got in France, but at other World Cups you've generated 3 billion, 4 billion. Yes. Rugby is the second biggest sport in the world. And yet it is from that. We are not cutting some of the fat for the members of the EXCO and the rest. We are looking at how we can invest more in the game, how we can raise more money. I'm hoping that we can bring a more dynamic approach to looking at raising money in different ways, beyond TV rights, beyond match ticket, beyond merchandising, the common sense areas. Understanding that sports is a lifestyle choice. If it's a lifestyle choice, then the people who matter may be people who play video games. There may be people who spend their money in other areas. We have to say, is our approach to raising money beyond the obvious correct? And I would love to get into the discussion about that. There are members of council who are members of global auditing groups, and the current president, chairman, run €100 million a year healthcare related business. So I would hope when it comes together, the dynamics of the people coming together will bring a certain mindset and energy that we can say that you have a 4-year term. At the end of that period, you've shifted the dial enough in a direction where we're putting together more competitions, better competitions, and a structure that means that Africa and Asia, who get about 2 million plus, can now be getting 4 million or 5 million or 6 million.
In fact, that really is where my interest is. I mean, I'm looking at the figures, especially from the 2015 and 2019 World Rugby, World Cup, the finals in England and in Japan combined. I mean, in terms of economic output, the two competitions generated over £7 billion. Imagine this money came to Africa and how that would turn our economy around. So, where you sit now, how would Africa benefit from your leadership on the board that has a responsibility to fashion our strategies and plans to achieve the results that World Rugby set for itself?
I think that if we do our job well, and we therefore understand the dynamics of where we're going, World Rugby is very creative in creating models, and the excellence of those models then rewards in terms of additional money. So you look at a system where you look at governance, and there are governance problems in many African countries. You look at a system where you look at how many children and young people are being encouraged to come in, where we're using training and education as part of it. I want to go beyond the current structures, but I'm not there saying just about Africa. But I'm really there saying, can the synergies that we bring together greater benefit Africa? And I believe they can. So you work on one and you get all. And I'm just waiting to see where the other members sit in this. If some of them sit where I think they do, then I think we can change it. We need to elevate the imagery of rugby within Africa. We need to get presidencies and the structures such that power talks to power, as it does with football. We need to get to a point where it is that the real decision makers understand the value that it brings, and then will also join in the investment that will bring about greater money across the board.
But is it possible, for example, the last time Africa hosted the Rugby World Cup was when Mandela was in power? And from that up to now, I'm yet to come across any concrete plan to have Africa stage the second biggest, event on the globe. Is it possible in your time?
Yes. Not in my time, because they've already decided that the next World Cup 27 is in Australia.
Right.
And 32 or whatever it is in America. So those 2 slots have already been taken. I certainly will not be sitting in office at that time. You have a finite life period within World Rugby. But after that, I would expect it to probably come back to South Africa. The infrastructure in South Africa is massive. But not only that, other countries are investing hugely. Egypt recently, I know, as you know, wished to host the Olympics.
Right.
So they are building huge infrastructure there. Senegal are hosting the World Junior Olympics next year. You've seen what Kagame is doing in Rwanda, World Cycling something competition. So you're getting more countries who are saying, we are ready to invest in infrastructure such that you should not discount coming to Africa. So I think as you go forward, you're going to see that. I think by virtue of the fact that you're even double world champions, nobody's ever achieved that before, back-to-back world champions, the way the South Africans have. So I think that certainly going into the future, not the next 2, but within the next 2 thereafter, there's a strong chance that it will come back to Africa.
But under you here in Ghana, a lot of people, a lot of young people, they've taken to rugby, and it's provided them some means of livelihood. I'm wondering the future for those young ladies and young gentlemen who've taken up the sport as a profession, for example. What does the future hold for such individuals?
I think it depends really on leadership. I'm no longer in charge of rugby in Ghana. And I know they're battling with governance issues to have elections sooner rather than later. A number of the people who are interested have come to me, and I've tried to explain that sport is big business. You get nothing from state. You get 10,000 hard currency a year from World Rugby, which is used to develop youth and the rest of it. You will participate in competitions if you are within the top 12 in Africa. And isn't it incredible that Ghana is ranked 7th amongst the women in a country that is not really playing that seriously, and the men are ranked 12? So the future really is, if you look at the recent competition in Ghana, Ghana were raised up to 7. 1, 2, 3 are world beaters. South Africa, Kenya, Uganda. 4th place this time just eluded, was Madagascar, who on a normal league game in Madagascar can get 20, 30,000 people.
Right.
Rugby is more important than football in Madagascar, you see. Then you come to 5, 6, Tunisia, Zambia, and then you come to Ghana. So Ghana is within touching of 4, 5. You see, the push to get 1, 2, 3, where some of the countries I mentioned are receiving €500,000 a year from their countries for rugby development.
Right.
1, 2, 3 are receiving $1 million, $750,000, $1.5 million.
This is coming from the state government.
From the state, just from the state.